Hi, today on the Prop Master, we're going to be taking your brand new, freshly completed foam helmet and getting it ready for paint. We're going to make any modifications to the shape for damage. We're going to fill any gaps or holes or anything that just needs to be smoothed out. And we're going to seal it. And then finally, we're going to make it a bit more rigid so it's protected better. Now, in prop making, there is no one absolute way to do something. It's really all about the final product. So there could be multiple paths that get you to the same destination. And in this video, you're going to see a few of those forks in the road. But we do all finally bring it together at the end, and we reach the same destination, a nice finished product. So let's get started.
Let's get this helmet ready for some paint. So the first thing you're going to want to do is if there's any corners that are particularly sharp, you just want to take those down with your sanding sticks. Mine's actually in pretty good shape. I don't see a lot of real sharp edges. They've been sanded down during the earlier sandings that we've done. But just go over all of your edges that are kind of sharp cornered. If they have a sharp pointy edge on there, it's not going to look like armor so much. It has a more fragile appearance. I mean, don't get me wrong, you don't want to totally round the corner off to where it's now just sort of a hill. You just want to take that edge off and go ahead and go through all of your different grits of sandpaper. And if you end up leaving some little ridges after all the sanding, you know, in some cases that's not a bad thing. It really kind of helps to sell the damage on a Boba Fett helmet when you start adding in the scratches. I mean, you don't want it to be excessive, but you know, you don't have to be perfect about getting everything just perfectly smooth. Now it's time to go ahead and put in the famous dent in the helmet. Now, from what I can figure from looking at pictures of the helmets, for our scale, or for this helmet, it's about 1¼ inches in diameter. And if you divide the helmet into a half this way, and then a line in the middle here, which is pretty close to what your pattern should be, then you want to be just a little bit above that center line, that seam that runs across here. And you want it to be, so if you're facing the helmet straight on, you want it to be maybe 3/4 of the way up from the mandibles or the T-visor before it gets to the top, somewhere in that general area. Now, if you're wondering why the helmet looks quite a bit different than it did before, it's because I forgot to put the dent in and went on to the next step, and now I'm coming back to put the dent in. But you'll see it in the right order. It just looks a little strange here. And in the next scene, when I'm sealing everything off, there won't be a dent there, but it'll all work out in the end. So I just drew an irregular shape that had some crease marks in it. I guarantee I won't be able to match anywhere near that when I actually do this, but that just gives me an idea. I'm going to use my Dremel with the little sanding drum on here. I have this little pencil attachment extension for my Dremel. Lets me get a little bit easier, but you can do the same things with a regular Dremel, no doubt about that. And I'm just going to start to form the dent. You want to be fairly gradual with it because it doesn't look like like you've been shot. It actually looks like a dent. So you want to take very shallow angles at the top, and then you can make it as deep as you want. Just you don't want, a cliff up here. You want it to be a gentle slope. So with that, let's see what we can do. Definitely don't suggest doing this after you're sealing it because it's definitely making things more difficult. By doing it at that angle, I'm more likely to make a cliff and not a dip. So you always want to do it from the curve going into it. You want to go from, you don't want to try to do this where you're doing the opposite end of the dent. You always want to do the part of the dent that's close to you. Probably don't want to go much deeper than that, or it'll start to look more like a hole and less like a dent. Okay. Now I think I'm going to take just a sanding block, or you can use just some sandpaper. Might actually be better than this, which I think I may actually do that. Okay, so I've just got a piece of 120 grit sandpaper. I just want to smooth this out. If you want to put some crease marks in there, you can do that as well. I would just use a file for that. I think if you try to do it with the Dremel, you're more likely to just carve away a big section of the helmet. Okay. So there's our dent. And you know, while I have the Dremel out, I think I'm going to go ahead and use that same piece to soften this edge on the end of the lower cheek, because that's really supposed to move smoothly into the mandible here. And I can fill that to do it, but I think I'll take that edge off. I think I can do that with the Dremel, so I'm going to give that a try real quick. The PVA glue that I've used to seal this up is really making it hard to cut through. And you want to remember that this is not a particularly thick piece of foam that you're dealing with here. It's only 5 millimeters thick. Now you're kind of hitting it end on, so we've got a little bit more material there than you might think, but it's still... That PVA glue is really making things difficult. Don't wait until after you seal it to do this. I was a little too excited to get started. One little development that's happened since I made the first videos on how to make this is that I have added templates for I added the exact templates that I used for the dome, and I've worked up some new templates for the rest of the helmet, so you can get everything down in the description of the earlier videos. So you won't have to reduce the size of the other templates or anything. You should be able to work everything as it is. So I'm just going to continue doing this, and the next time you see what's going on in the next scenes, there will not be a dent or anything smoothed out, but after that I'll be caught back up again. So I'll see you then. I'm going to go ahead and finish smoothing. And after you have everything sanded, you're going to want to make sure that the foam is sealed up, heat sealed. And that's very easy. You just want to take your heat gun, which is, you can get heat guns at almost anywhere. I think this one came from Sears, but any home store like Lowe's or Home Depot, at any parts, automotive parts supply places like O'Reilly's or AutoZone, they're going to carry them also. They're kind of everywhere. So just turn it up to your highest setting. Turn it on for a second so it can heat up. And then it doesn't take but a second. Just kind of run it over the area that you've sanded. If you haven't done this to your foam at all. You want to do the entire helmet. Don't let it linger. It's a very quick process. I can show you on this piece of foam right here. You can see it when it happens, and it doesn't take very long. You just run it on there, and you can see that change of color. That's all you're looking for. And all it really does is it just kind of closes up the open cells of the foam on the surface. And if you don't do that, it also makes it kind of a shiny surface. You can tell that way also. If you don't do that, when you prime it and seal it for paint, you get little bubbles, I've noticed. So after you heat seal everything, then you want to run over the entire surface with a sealer. In my case, I like to use PBA glues of some sort. This is a helmet, so it's not particularly flexible. If you have a really flexible piece, the PBA glues have a tendency to make little creases, little wrinkles in the surface. But since this is a non-flexing piece, that's the way I like to do it. PBA glues are like Type Bond, or in my case, and what I think probably most people prefer, is the Mod Podge. It holds up pretty well. It's not expensive. I got this at I think it was at Hobby Lobby for $8.99. Michael's, of course, places like that. And just use a brush or a foam brush. Probably the better thing would be to pour this into a container. I'm used to a little smaller brush. And just brush it on. You want to do several coats, as many as you can, at least 3. This is the glossy, but they have other finishes as well. Okay, so there's nothing special about it. You just kind of slather it on there. I mean, you can try to smooth out when you see obvious globs. And you're going to want to do, well, the container actually says 5 layers if you want to sand it afterwards to get a really shiny surface, but I think 3 is going to be fine because we're really not after that shiny surface at this point. You want to try to get it into the little cracks because it'll seal, close up any of the small cracks. And I would highly suggest coming out and moving the rangefinder around while it's drying. You want to wait 15 to 20 minutes between your layers, and I would come out a couple of times in those 15 to 20 minutes and just move the rangefinder, make sure that it's not gluing itself into position. And so I guess we'll just come back here in 15 minutes to do the next layer. It's been about 15 minutes and there's still a little bit of the glue showing here, and where it's a lot thicker, kind of globbed in there. That's still white, but for the most part, most of the areas have turned transparent. After I finished this, I went back in and washed out my brush with water and my cup. and then just laid them out in the sun, and they are completely dry now. So I'm ready to put on the next coat. Oh, I was listening to the video, and I think I said PBA glue about 4 times, and it's not PBA, it's PVA. V is in Victor. I have no idea why that popped into my head, but it's a V is in vinyl. So it's PVA glue, and that's Mod Podge or Tight Bond or even Elmer's glue wall is also a type of PVA glue. I like to use the Mod Podge just because it's been slightly all of those glues have slight differences, and the Mod Podge has been designed basically for this purpose as a sealer, as a coating. So you're not dealing with a glue that is more set up for being tacky and gluing things together. So I'm going to go ahead and put on another coat just like I did before. Still going to try to fill up as many gaps as I can, because as you do more and more layers, it'll fill the gaps up a little better. And we'll be back in time for the third coat. Okay, I finished putting on a second coat and let that dry for 15 minutes, and I'm ready to put the third coat on. And once again, don't forget a couple of times while it's drying just to come out and move that around so that it doesn't glue itself into position. If you get a big glop of this on someplace where you don't necessarily want a big glop of it on, like for instance, you're not trying to seal up a crack or anything, and you get a big glop on here on the front or something like that, you want to go ahead and wipe that off as early in the process as possible, because if it stays on there and hardens, and then you wipe it off at the last bit, you may not, it might pull most of the glue off, or the Mod Podge off. You want to take it off so that if it takes it off, you get several more coats of it on there. I don't worry about the spots where I get a big glop, and I'm not worried about it, like in here where I'm really trying to fill up a gap in the foam or something like that. But if you get a big glop here, it's probably going to show up on the end product. Now, being that this is Boba Fett, it's probably not a problem, and it might even add to the overall aesthetics of it. I mean, this helmet has been through a lot, and is covered in dirt and mud and sand and damaged heavily. And it's not going to be a problem. And I just realized that I haven't put the big dent in there yet, and I should probably do that before I get too far along with this. Got a little bit ahead of myself. So I'll be back when this is dry. And we're back. Now it's been about 24 hours since we started the application of the Mod Podge, and everything's dried nice. You can see that it's all transparent. My understanding is that if you want it to be completely cured, you have to wait, I think, something like 72 hours, but for our needs, this is plenty. So our next step is to fill any gaps that the Mod Podge didn't fill. In my case, I've got this crack, or this seam back here in the back, where the sides of the helmet were just a little bit too small for the dome, like maybe 132nd of an inch too small. So I'll need to fill that. I'm going to need to fill where I butchered the cheek, with the Dremel tool, trying to smooth that corner out because I did it after I put the Mod Podge on. Definitely want to do any work that you want to do on the helmet as far as changing the shape. You want to do that before you put the Mod Podge on. It's not terribly bad, but it needs some work. We just want to smooth that out nice. I'm tempted to go into the template and just enlarge this by 1/4 of an inch so that it will just cover that piece. On this, my very first prototype that I did, you can see that it covers up that edge and it makes a much nicer edge in general. So I think I may just enlarge the mandible size by 5 millimeters, a little less than 1/4 of an inch, so it'll make that a little nicer. Hopefully that will have been done before you get to this point. Well, it would have been done while you were building the helmet. So the first thing you can do before you start filling in these gaps is you need to sand on the Mod Podge. Nothing very aggressive, just the 320 grit. And lightly sand the area and the area around it. This is also when you're going to want to sand off any large globs that are around on the helmet. They'll show up white. If they're a really large just glop of it on there, you might actually want to wait until it cures a little bit more, a little closer to that 72 hours to sand it off. Just because right now the really thick stuff is still, it's solid, but it's like rubber at this point. And if you try to pull it off, it's just going to pull off everything else around it. So you want to sand it instead. Then you probably want to wait until the last minute before you try to sand that off, just to make sure it's good and hard. It's interesting, I went ahead and put 5 layers of the Mod Podge on here using a regular brush and also a foam brush, and there was no real discernible difference in brush strokes between the regular brush and a foam brush, which kind of surprised me actually. So basically I'm just looking for areas where I might want to put some filler in just to fill gaps or smooth something out. And to fill the gaps and smooth things out, I'm trying a new product which I've never tried before. It's it's a Bondo product, and it's for bumper repair. So it's very similar to the other glazings and fillers that I've seen people use, especially for filling in stone chips on your car and things like that. But in this case, it's for flexible surfaces. So as you don't have to worry about it cracking and everything when your helmet flexes a little bit. This should flex along with it. So let's see how this goes. I've never tried it before. You have about a 7-minute work time with it. So what happened there was that I guess there was an air bubble in the tubes, and so one part was coming out long before the other part was. So I just wanted to stop and get rid of that and start over now that it's all going to come out. I also took the opportunity to put my gloves on, which is definitely better than not having gloves. Like I was saying before, you have about a 7-minute work time, and then it cures in 30 minutes. It can be sanded. Mix this up good. This would definitely be the right time for a respirator. This stuff smells well about like what you would expect it to. So you want to be in a very well ventilated area, or wear a respirator, or both. And just yes or not. Work it into your gap. I just took this little piece of scrap wood and shaped it a little bit so I could have a couple of different sizes. Try to get it as smooth as you can now so you don't have to sand as much later on. But you do want it to cover and fill in. Yeah, I'm glad I was wearing gloves. I've already got it on my hand. Try to work as quickly as you can without making a huge mess. I give up. Just work it in. I didn't want to mix up too much because I didn't want it to go off on me, but I should have mixed up a little more. Don't panic if you are having a hard time. Just keep working on it. There's nothing that can't be fixed later on. Starting to thicken up a lot now, so I think we are coming to the end of our work time. I'm going to mix up another batch, change my glove, and do the same thing on this side over here, and then I'll be back. Well, it's been about 35-40 minutes, and everything's cured up. So now we just need to sand it. I'm going to go ahead and start with your aggressive sandpaper. And you just want to get it smooth. So you're going to, do some damage. Try to avoid the foam at this point though, because you don't want to remove all of the Mod Podge from the foam. Right away I can see I've got some high areas and a low area, so we just want to sand all this to where it's all consistent. Okay, I've just about finished up with the 60 grit, and I just want to remind you, when you're dealing with these small areas, the point is not to orient your paper so that you can get in there and sand it. You want to actually bring the level of the stuff around it down to where it can all hit. And I can kind of feel that that's still a pretty good recess there. So I'm not going to bring everything down to that level. I think what I'll have to do is get some more of the filler, or I might just try, I've got some Bondo, I'll just stick some Bondo in there maybe, that little one piece, and fill that area. Now I'm just going to go to the 120 grit paper and go for the edges here and try to feather those into the foam a little bit, and also try to get rid of some of the deeper scratches, the deeper marks that are in the filler. So I think I'm going to end up going on, and I'm going to put another coat of the Mod Podge just over the areas that I sealed. Just these areas. I'll put probably no more than 2 coats on. Okay, final verdict on the Bondo bumper repair kit as far as using it as a filler. And I'll be honest, I was completely prepared to say it had been a failed experiment, and it was just not, it was too thin to really fill in any larger spaces, and you didn't get enough of the product for $10. But after everything is finished, I put 2 layers of the Mod Podge back over the top of it. And I gotta tell you, it looks great. I don't know what you can see on here, but everything is completely smoothed out. There are no gaps anywhere. Everything is smooth. It actually worked very well. I'm afraid you're getting a little less of the prop master with all my tried and true operations here, and a little bit more of just plain old Bob saying, you know, let's try it and see what happens. I left this piece uncovered by the Mod Podge just to see how it reacts with everything that comes after it. So as far as whether or not you should use the product, I'm going to go ahead and say, well, I'll tell you what, I'll say it's up to you. If you want to go this route like I did, then, you know, I would say go for it. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and show you what to do as far as using the caulk. In order to do that, I have put together this little rig. It's just got a couple of areas that are not smooth, and I'm going to go ahead and fill those up and smooth everything out and show you how to do that. So I know I've seen some people use different kinds of sealants and things like that. I'm just going to use a regular old caulk. In this case, it's in the small little tube, but you can use it, you know, full size if you want to, if that's what you've got. This is just make sure it's a paintable caulk. You don't want the kind that you can't paint over. The drawback to this is that it's not sandable. So when you're done, you know, that's the way it's going to look. You want to make sure you've got a source of water. And very important when working with caulk is you want something to wipe your hands on. It's pretty straightforward. This is an older tube, so you just have to cut the end off. And essentially, I'm just going to run a bead of the caulk in the gap. As smooth as you can. And I got to tell you, if you're trying to do a surface that looks like it's been welded together, you could probably just leave that exactly as it is. And when it cures and you paint over it, it's just going to look like it's a welded seam. You even get the little, I don't know if you can see that, but you can get the little circular pattern in there. But we're not going for that, so after you do that, just take your finger, dip your finger in the water, and you want to have clean fingers here. And you're just going to shape you just want to shape the caulk after that. Dip your finger in the water and gently rub your finger over it. Always go back to the water. I'm making a mess. And then you want to smooth out the edges. If you don't smooth out these edges, they look, you know, plenty smooth now, but when you paint over them, they'll look like a big ridge. You want to move smoothly across. You don't want to, you know, kind of jerk back and forth. Be bold. Okay. And we'll take a look at this after it cures. Okay, here it is after it's cured. In this case, 2 hours. The kind that I normally use is paintable within 15 minutes. So it's a little bit less frustrating than having to wait 2 hours. And here it is painted. Now, granted, this foam is not sealed at all, so that's why there's definitely a big difference. In fact, you can see where the foam has been sealed by the barge cement. But it does a pretty good job. But like I said before, there's no sanding, so it's, you've got one shot at it. So you basically have two choices. You can go with the bumper repair kit or some other filler product from Bondo, or you can go with the caulk. If I were going to do it again and I went with the bumper repair kit, I would do that before I put on the Mod Podge. So I would do that as part of the putting the dent in process. If I was going to use the caulk, I would wait until just before I was going to paint it. So those are the basic differences as to the way I did it this time. At this point, you've got some choices to make. Don't you love choices? You could just take some fine sandpaper and go over this to try to take out as much of the brush strokes as you can without removing the Mod Podge. And just go ahead and spray it with a primer, especially if you had if you could find the self-leveling primers. They kind of are, they kind of fill in scratches. That's going to be the quickest and roughest finish you can get. But I've seen some nice results from that. A step up from that is going to be what I've seen quite often, actually, which is using Plasti-Dip. Rust-Oleum also has a product very similar to this. I can't remember what it's called. I think there's a picture of someone spraying a mag wheel, automotive wheel, on the can. They're essentially the same. And instead of a primer, you can go ahead and just spray this with the Plasti-Dip. Just remember, this stuff is nasty stuff as far as breathing, so you want to be outside. If you're going to do that, definitely take a pan and fill it with hot water from the tap and let these cans sit in there for about 10 minutes. That'll give you the best results. Even so, I've seen on occasion you can end up with a finish like this, where it is, I don't know, like little craters, just covering the whole surface. It's just got little bubbles or little specks that come out. And that's fine if you're, trying to get that sort of World War II steel helmet look. Now, to be fair, I also used that on this surface, which does not have any of that pitting. Now, I did get some in the back here. So it can be a little bit hit or miss with that, even when you take all the right precautions. Or you can do what I'm going to do here and get a much nicer finish. Now, if you notice, this actually isn't as smooth as I would like it, mostly because I used a casting material that has too short a pot time, And while you try to put it on, it suddenly cures and you start getting, you know, very rough results and a lot of sanding. And I'm a little bit still in that predicament because I have ordered some new casting resin, but it has not arrived yet. So what I have is a smooth-on product. You can get it online. There are a lot of distributors around the country as well. This is Smooth-Cast 65D, and it is perfect for this application, except that it has a 2-minute pot life, which is great if you're just pouring something into a cast. But if you're trying to brush something on, it's just nowhere near long enough. The idea was to be able to get it on fairly thick and then move the helmet around for its pot lifetime, and that would make a nice self-leveling, very smooth surface. So what I've ordered is Smooth-Cast 66D, which has all of the same characteristics of this 65D, except for it has a 7-minute pot life. So that's what I'm going to be doing the helmet with for the most part. But I'll be honest, I kind of want to get this out and posted. And I'm just kind of antsy to get along with the process. So I'm going to go ahead and do the cheeks with this, or I'm going to try to do it with the 65D. And then I'll definitely wait until the new stuff comes in to do the rest of the helmet. And I probably won't do this back section at all, because this the Smooth-Cast is a semi-rigid urethane resin, and so basically when you're done, you're going to get a plastic helmet on top of this. It's extremely durable. It's a lot more, it's still somewhat flexible, but it's more rigid than the foam is. But it's also fairly thick, and if I try to put it in here, it's going to just fill in everything, and you're going to lose any detail that you had. So I'll probably skip that area, and the wood doesn't really need it, because it'll also fill in all this stuff. But I'm going to go ahead and do the cheek sections with the 65D. So you can order it directly from Smooth-On online. I'll post a link to it down below. But you want to order the Smooth-Cast 66D, not the 65. And we'll start work on that. I have everything ready for this. I have individual cups, which I have measured. I'm actually on camera. But then I have measured levels on. They're both exactly the same. I've labeled them A and B. I also transferred those marks onto the inside. I have a cup that I'm going to put everything into, and I have a chopstick ready to stir with. I'm not sure why, but for some reason, every time I order sushi, they give me 4 sets of chopsticks. And I have basically the cheapest non-acid brush that I could get, because this is a one-use application. There's no cleaning this out. I'm going to go ahead and shake it. It says shake well, so I can only assume this is putting lots of air bubbles into it, but This is probably a good time to mention that I have my gloves on, I have eye protection, I have the garage door open, and I have some fans going to make sure there's plenty of ventilation. I'm not wearing a respirator, otherwise, you wouldn't be able to hear me very well. You can barely hear me now. So these are mixed in equal parts by volume. If you want to use some kitchen scales, you can do that, but they're not equal in weight. It's like 100 to 97 or something like that. So in this case, even though I'm tempted to use my scale, it's just a lot easier to do it by volume. So now I have my parts A and my part B measured out in 2 different containers. Once I pour these into the cup together, that's starting the clock. At that point I have 2 minutes to finish whatever it is that I'm going to be doing. So here we go. Give it a quick stir. I'm not taking the time to try to be too clean about it. I just want to get it on here. Not mess with it too much. I'm going to go for one more, and that's it. Come on, level out. I probably had a little bit of time to smooth that a little bit, but I get the feeling that I would just have worse brush marks. Just as a demonstration, at this late point, I'm going to go ahead and try to put that on here. Okay, now we're already getting much thicker. Yeah, it's still working though. I'm trying to think that maybe the last time I may have had a little bit too much hardener in there. Or maybe I was just covering a much larger area and time went faster than I thought. Now we're definitely getting into where it's going to be not so good. And it happens very quickly. So you get one on really good and the next one goes on and it's terrible. So we'll take a look at that when it cures. And I'll see you then. Well, it's been 15 minutes and you can see that it actually makes a nice coating. The area where it started to set up, we end up with those rough parts that look like the other helmet, and a lot of sanding to try to get those out. And the deep, some of the deeper parts where I was trying to brush it on, never did quite come out. So it's time to do the second cheek. I have my cup here, and it makes a nice little mold of the inside of the cup. So I'm going to use the cup again. obviously not much I can do about the brush. So let's go ahead and do this. Both parts go in. Stir, stir, stir. And start the clock. Okay, well, unfortunately my camera ran out of memory in the middle of that last attempt when we were doing the second cheek. But these have gone so much better than I was expecting that I'm going to go ahead and attempt the top. This could be a vast miscalculation, but this has been an episode of experimentation, so let's go for it. I've mixed up, or I've got the stuff ready for a little bit bigger batch, and I've masked off the helmet with the tape sticking up higher than the rim, just to try to contain it so it doesn't drip down everywhere. I didn't want to put it on top because I was afraid it would drain over the top and then solidify, and then the tape would be there forever. I'm going to try to just kind of almost like pour it, and then I'm going to continually move this around and see if I can spread it around that way. So here goes nothing. Okay, that was very thin. I'm definitely making a mess. Oh, there's a whole section here that I haven't gotten. Definitely a mess. Looks like I'm going to have to do some more to get the back. Hope you're seeing this. Oops, get my rag. If they've got bad drips, now is the time to get it. I wish I'd made that a little bit tighter, because that's going to be the most problematic area. I'm just making sure that this stays free enough that it's not going to glue it in one position. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pull all of this off if I can. Because it shouldn't be quite so runny now. Oh, God. Famous last words. Yeah, I think we're getting past the point of wiping up globs. Very messy, but all in all, I think it's going to work pretty well. Okay, this will be cured in about 5 minutes, and maybe a little longer. And I'll get ready to do the second little bit here. I'm ready to do the back part of the dome. I've lightly sanded with the 120 grit sandpaper, and I wiped everything down really good with the cotton cloth. I've masked everything off like I did before. I'm going to go with a smaller pour this time, and I've remembered that I've got a whole bunch of these little medicine cups from the kids over the years, and they're now big enough that they don't use them anymore, so they could be perfect for this. I might just try using the brush at first here. There is no doubting the areas that need help, or need coverage. It's one good thing about this stuff turning white. I believe the 66D turns light gray instead of white, but how did it get over there again? Now it's all over the rangefinder. Again. If you get it someplace you don't want it, it's not that big a deal. Just wipe it off while it's still liquid. Since this dripped in there again, I'm going to do this until it cures. Oh, I did notice the seam that I had left uncovered with the Mod Podge. some of this had dripped down onto it and it came off very easily. So I've gone ahead and put a layer of Mod Podge on there. So apparently the bumper repair kit will not, the urethane will not stick to that without putting the Mod Podge on first. My understanding is that it doesn't stick to the foam very well either unless you put the Mod Podge on beforehand. And my findings would tend to agree with that because these drips come off quite easily if I didn't have my gloves on anyway. Whereas the areas that have been covered with Mod Podge, it's quite stuck. I'll be back when this is cured. Well, unfortunately, I managed to somehow lose the last two files that I made, the last two parts of the video. So you do not get to see me brush on the urethane for the back or sand. But I thought I'd go ahead and go over what I did, at least as far as sanding. I mean, I did the back essentially the same way as I did the front area first. It still looks a little bit rough, but I think most of that is just, if it goes on thick, it dries or cures more opaque, and then I sand it down and it's still opaque, whereas some of the other stuff is still much more translucent. Feels very smooth. Mostly I sanded with the sanding sticks. The being rigid and flat actually is a big help. It helps you to sort of get the high areas without hitting the low areas. The other thing that was really helpful was I used this half round file. It's somewhat sharp on the front, and of course the edges are quite sharp, so I actually kind of used that to cut in these edges where they had really a little over smoothed out. So I was able to use this to cut into that, and also to get some nice flat areas here. I also used this little needle file, but it's flat and has a flat end, which is also somewhat sharp. And I actually used it for the same areas and just kind of scraped almost like a backwards chisel. And it worked really well for that, especially in a lot of the detail areas. And there you have it. This is pretty much ready for paint at this point. Now that's not to say that if I put the first coat of primer on here, you know, a lot of times you can suddenly see all kinds of stuff that you couldn't see before, and I may have to go back in with the file and take that out and then primer it again. But essentially this is the end for preparing to paint. I know it's rough, but it is ready to paint. I'm not too worried about the way it looks now for two main reasons. First of all, you have to remember that the opacity or transparency of the resin has much more to do with how thick the resin was when it cured, and a lot less to do with whether or not it's actually covering. And also, this is Boba Fett's helmet, so any little imperfections that are there are really going to come in handy later on when I start weathering the helmet. In the next videos, we'll be doing a pristine paint job and finally putting some age, wear, and tear on it. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe so you can follow upcoming videos regarding the rest of Boba Fett's armor, as well as Jango's and Sabine's. Thanks.